Hello and welcome to this video. Today I'm going to try out Sumi inks. And as you can see, these are pretty old. This is supposed to be a stamp pad, and the ink thing or the stuff that they used for that stamp pad, it still seems to work, but the foam or whatever it was put into completely disintegrated, and it will this weird sticky mess, but it still works, so I'm still going to use it. As for the other supplies, I got a flatter inkstone, and I got these inks. They come with a pamphlet. I don't know what it says. It has some illustrations of the markings and stuff. I cannot read it at all. I guess I could have used Google Translate, but I totally forgot that exists in the moment. But it says very fancy paper pamphlet. I don't know if it's like any kind of signature of how it's made or how it's used or something. But yeah, these ink sticks and this ink gift set. This is actually a gift set that comes with this huge inkstone and this fancy fabric, little container. They all are originally from Asia. I don't quite know where my relative got them from, when they got them. We had them in our possession for quite a while, and I know he got them when he traveled. But basically, all of these are pretty much authentic. I cannot guarantee their quality because even this just seems to be a gift set or something. So I don't know if the brushes will be good, but we get some brushes, we get another black ink stick and this brush holder that you can, I guess, also use as a chopstick holder, and this weird stone. I don't know what it is for. Maybe it's for grinding some pigments down even more or something. It has a rounded and a flat side. If you know, please let me know in the comments, because I really would love to know what it is for. So yeah, the first thing I did was I started grinding the inks. I watched a lot of YouTube videos, a lot of different ones. I couldn't pinpoint specifically which YouTube videos I went with for tutorials and stuff, because I didn't really follow any tutorials directly. I listened to people's advice on how to draw mountains and stuff, and then just went in with some inspirational pictures and started. I think I'm grinding the ink wrong here. I think you're supposed to hold the stick flat, and I'm doing it at an angle from the side, which I think you're supposed to grind it flat from the top so it uses up evenly. Either way, I think I keep doing that wrong all the time. But, I'm still learning. That's the first time I'm actually using this properly. I have used these inks before, just in normal paintings, but that was with more of a watercolor setting. Now, these are not reversible, so these are reactivatable, these don't behave like watercolors. But yeah, you can definitely use them for doing flat coloring and stuff in a watercolor type style. But I wanted to try a more authentic style, so I'm going to use these brushes. As you can see, I have two of the same size. One of them is actually a more modern one that a friend brought me, and it's the one with the brown hair. I'm going to use the old one though, that came basically in this little package of travel goodies, so to speak. And I wanted to start out with the most prominent things I saw in a lot of artworks, which were mountains and trees. And people seem to work a decent bit with texture, or it seems to be all with brush texture. So I started off trying to use a very light color for the base of the mountain, just trying to color in the base. And the first, I think, mistake I made, because I figured it actually works a bit better. I'm using watercolor paper here. I think the paper definitely matters, because this soaks up the ink way too much, way too quickly. I don't know which paper they specifically used, but I think it's definitely not this kind of paper originally. And I think it would definitely benefit from you wetting the paper a bit first. But it kind of worked out, especially this dry brush dragging down technique that a lot of people seem to use, but I couldn't get the lines to look how I wanted to. It looked more like moss was covering the stone or something. It didn't have the shadow variation. And then I tried to draw a tree with trying to get the brush texture. As you can see, it really didn't work out. This tree is way out of proportion, Normally the amount, the thickness of the branches in total should be together about the same as the thickness of the trunk, and here like the branches are almost as thick as the trunk itself, so even just a single one, so that didn't work out well. I went over it again, and actually like the mountains definitely do look a bit better, but like I don't know, I think like the paper was way too dry and the brush kept like dragging weirdly, so I had some issues with that. And then I thought it looked flat, so I wanted to try and shade in some like background mountains. I think like the whole premise is to like start off with the lighter colors and then work to the darker. So it didn't really look that good, but this is a trial piece, so I wanted to try out all the colors. And the only other color I had was this orange. It is a very pretty and vibrant orange, but it doesn't go down on paper as such. I really ground it down to where it felt like a paste. And every time it dried, it like got really washed out. I don't know if that's natural with this kind of pigment. Like you can see, it's like very vibrant here. And like later I have some pictures of when it's dried in the end, and it just doesn't keep the vibrancy, especially not on the parts of the darker ink. But with this first test piece, I kind of like, tested the waters a bit and figured out what I specifically want to learn, and it had definitely more to do with like shading and texturing. So I got some inspiration from some more pictures, and it looked like the mountains are definitely a bit more separated in most of these pieces. And this time I actually wetted the paper. I definitely like dabbled like into like it a bit too much, because as you can see, it completely, when it dried, like it completely smudged around, especially where I had like more water. So like it all looks like foggy and blended together. Like the initial part looks really good where I put down the first mountains, and then it just loses all definition, and I think that's just because the paper was a bit too wet. It weirdly only blended more towards where I actually put ink down and then in between. But yeah, it kind of looks like a bit more foggy, so I guess I'm working with that. And this time I wanted to go, practice more trees, so I drew like way more trees. I wanted to work with like foreground and background. At first I wanted to try and like really make the trees in the background look like lighter and stuff, but when I put them down, like to have contrast, because the mountains are so dark, I had to use way more pigment, like grind the inks down like way more to get more pigment. And that meant that it basically, the trees are closer on the mountain range than, I wanted them to. But I decided to stick with it with these darker colors, and decided to also like make the leaves a bit darker too, just to make it look like you're standing on one mountain looking up to the other, and the trees are just, they're a bit further away, but they're still like decently detailed, and they just cast shadows there. And I think it kind of worked out. You can definitely tell that like some of the like rock texture worked out way better in this piece. And I definitely got a little bit more control on how the trees looked, and they look way more naturally like trees. One thing I noticed here pretty quickly is that, every brush stroke counts with the colors and stuff. As I'm usually a watercolor artist, you can go back and kind of fix things, but like with these inks, it seems that people like work a lot more with like just single brush strokes, and the textures that gives you, like there's no like, or at least not really from what I've seen, no like touching up, going over the lines, making them look perfectly and stuff. Like all the textures come from what the brushes naturally give you. And yeah, these smaller brushes didn't really work for that. I tried it on the trees, but they just like the fibers kept just like moving way too much, and it didn't work out at all. So I couldn't really get that like dry brush texture that I tried to achieve. So, I just kind of gave up on that with the smaller brushes. It definitely works a bit better with the mountains in the foreground, as you can see with the larger ones, but yeah. I think that's just really about brush and material quality here. Also, I didn't have any blue, so I decided to go in with watercolors. I tried like a dry watercolor technique, but watercolors are made with gum arabic, which like is a bit more sticky if you don't water it down properly. So it does like some of the texture, but not as well as I'd love to. So I just went in normally like with the authentic brushes, but just like went over it a little bit more. And then I wanted to try out ink stamp pad with my stamp that I have, because signatures are easy to replicate. But if you do a lot of artworks, having a stamp with your logo definitely helps. I actually cut that with my laser cutter at some point during Inktober because I was just so fed up with like how bad me trying to recreate my logo looks under every picture. But it works out greatly. I did went in a bit more of that dry because like everything just blended together again, and I tried to like write more ink down, but it kept getting like this weirdly like more sticky texture and it didn't apply that well. And I tried with the smaller brush to get more texture. It kind of works, but it completely blends in again as it dries. I don't know if that's the quality or how the ink like works in general. I would be quite curious to know. So if you have any experience with like how these inks are supposed to work, let me know in the comments down below. Also, like if this is like a natural thing that they like blend in or like completely lose their vibrancy or not. One thing I definitely noticed is I read a lot about like which kind of pigments they use, and you know, they basically seem to make these ink sticks with like a natural resin and a natural pigment. So the black, for example, is like more of like a soot that they use, and you can really see that with these because like the black has like a very brownish hue. Don't quite know what they used for the orange, but yeah, it was just a lot of natural pigments they seem to have used and like pounded them into like these shapes with like some resin. I saw the like videos of where like people knead them for hours with like the pigment, and like most of them seem to be just like resin based. I don't know if it's pure resin in like a lot of cases, but like it seems to me like they make this kind of dough that they knead. And then like once it's like fully kneaded and the pigment is like really dispersed and like really finely in there and evenly, like they shape it into these sticks and let them dry for like ages. And I think it's a very interesting technique to like make inks and stuff, because our inks, like I think they're called Indian inks, they're like obviously made way different. Like when we think of pen inks, we don't think of these kind of, you know, pigments and a stick. We think more of like the typical like blues and stuff we get in liquid form that we would use with like any kind of like I guess like quill pen-esque thing in the originals, like, you know, carved wood that we would use for applying it, and then later metal nibs. Wouldn't like as much think of it like as using it with brushes and having to grind it down. But, you know, apparently there's something like meditative that people used to do with like these inks, you know, grinding the ink for somebody else was something special, I think. And like, you know, just grinding ink in general was apparently thought as very meditative and things like that. At least from what I've read on it so far. I don't know quite if that's like very accurate, but you know, it was actually quite interesting and quite a lot of fun to grind the ink on the stone and see how it disperses. The stone is not very rough, but like it actually feels pretty smooth, but it definitely grinds down the ink nice and smoothly. So that worked really well, and this inkwell with like having the water reservoir definitely worked out a bit better than the flat one. So the flat stone did hold a decent bit of pigment, but I think if you work with like larger brushes and like more detailed, I think you want to have one of those larger ink stones. Anyway, for my last of the 3 paintings I decided to do, I wanted to do a landscape. And I used the like larger brushes and I wetted the paper but made sure like to like evenly dab it off so it has an even watering. I still lost a bit of the mountain lines when I first went in because I, you know, put like the second line of mountains in where it was still wet and you can really see it flow into each other. It created a nice bit of shading for like the lighter background mountain, so I'm not mad about it, but I had to go over it again with like a dark tone. And then the tree in this one definitely looks way better. I just couldn't get the leaves to look quite natural. Like I tried to bunch them up and like I had references of trees, but like these inks are very hard to shade. I tried to use some black as the shading and then go over it with the orange, but the orange seems to completely disappear when I put it on black ink. Even though I let the background mountains completely dry, like it just completely doesn't appear at all. And then you know, I made a little darker bush in the foreground. I hoped it would also have some more of the orange, but no. And I let the blacks dry before I applied the orange, and just didn't want to show up for some reason, even though I like ground it till it was like really hard to apply with the brush. So like really pigmented, basically. But either way, I really like how that one turned out still. Like, I think I definitely got the flow of the inks down a bit better with like how the mountains are shaded. And then I decided, you know, animals are a huge part too. And like, I've seen some really majestic tiger art and stuff with these. Now, thinking about how they, you know, must have practiced quite a lot to get them done. Because like every brushstroke they do counts. Again, like the tiger stripes and stuff, those being made with like single brush strokes, I think they must have taken a lot of pride into like how their brush strokes work. I saw like mentions or like heard also of mentions in like that there used to be people that they would ask, you know, for like basically like good luck charms and stuff, or like to name their shops. So they would ask like people that are like higher rank or like, you know, really good at calligraphy to like make their shop signs, and it would like signalize, you know, I don't know, like prosperity, success, something like that, at least from, you know, what I gathered. And it's very impressive to me that this is such a huge part of the culture. So like, you know, learning these kind of like brushmanships, I guess you would call it, seems to have been a huge part, especially for like, I guess, officials and like higher ranking people, or like, you know, scholars and stuff. And I guess, you know, calligraphers definitely were seen as more, you know, value people of society, which I totally get, because it's very impressive, you know, to learn how the brush works. Like, you really need to learn your materials, how they flow and how they feel and stuff. Like, you cannot experiment around, go over it, like fix things. You really need to like know how the brush strokes will behave when you paint these paintings and stuff, because again, there's no undo, there's no reactivating. I used inks before, like acrylic inks and stuff for artworks, but like these are way more liquid, and you had like a different kind of control in like, you know, diluting them down with water and stuff to like get the vibrancy of pigments you want. With these instincts and the grinding that you have to, I think it's like a huge bit of practice that goes into it, like how you grind the ink and, you know, the right consistencies to get like the right pigmentations and all that stuff, and how it behaves. Because I noticed a great lot, like when I graded a bit more, it like really became like more sticky. I guess, you know, the resins would break down with the water, and it just wasn't really applicable with a brush. Even if I wetted the brush a little bit beforehand, it would only mean that it would like dilute the pigment a bit more. So I think like getting vibrant colors with these, and like, you know, obviously it also has to do with like having like great ink stakes and great like brushes and stuff that can actually, you know, take in these pigments. I think it's definitely an art form. And, you know, obviously like line weight, line variation is a huge thing, and that's something I always love to use in my artwork anyways, like line variation to express things. Like when I do digital art or I work with watercolors, I like to, you know, work a bit more with like having lines that like taper and stuff, because I just like how much you can express with that in your art style. Of course, you know, it's always a thing of preferences, but in this art style specifically, it seems to be like a huge thing. So, you know, in the end, when I tried out these fishes, I tried some different techniques, like wet on wet with like the darker ones, and then the middle one, I wanted to just try, you know, different shadings of spots. And again, no matter how often I went over the spots like that I want darker, it never really got to be like a true full black, except for sometimes when I did the wet technique and like the stuff blends out. Even if I went over it like multiple times with a really dark, like really tough, sticky, almost like, you know, unusable like type of ink, when I, you know, didn't add more water just to keep the pigments, it didn't stay as dark. It always lightened up a bit. And again, don't know if that's the quality of the sticks or not, but it's definitely like very noticeable, and like you cannot know how a piece turns out until it dries. And I noticed a lot of times, like, I was very happy with the look of it when it was still a bit wet, and then when it dried, it completely blended and it lost all of the nice brush texture that I had, which is a shame, but, you know, again, don't know if that's supposed to be like that, and if it's just, you know, a thing you need to learn, or if it's my quality of equipment. But anyway, I actually had a lot of fun. I think this is a very fun, like, art stand technique. Definitely, you know, you need to get into it and learn, but there's so many like amazing artists out there that use these techniques, and like seeing all these like landscape images and like knowing that they're actually made with very precise brush strokes and you cannot go over them again and fix them and stuff, it just makes them way more impressive in my eyes than anything else, because, you know, working with watercolors, I obviously can always go over them and fix things, but with these things it's just not possible. And like I think it was still like a lot of fun to like just go with the flow and don't try to be like perfect, just embrace the texture of the brushes. And I think especially with the fish in the end and like my final artwork, I definitely learned a lot. Like, you can really see the progression. I mean, ignoring the first three, that was definitely just me like, you know, not paying any attention to how that looked at all. It was just me trying out the technique. But like, I think like progressive wise, you can really see how like the textures appear more and more in the mountains and stuff. And I think it's definitely a technique, you know, that people should try out. Obviously, you know, not having as much control, there's a lot of artists out there, me also, I have to admit that, like, I think that's a bit more scary, because like mostly if you do like a lot of art and you have your own art style, you want to be in control of that art style. And I guess you only get this control with like practice and like really dedication to this art form. But I still think it's like a lot of fun to like go into foreign waters, basically test them out, test out these art sets. I think you can really learn something on, like, you know, maybe how you embrace your own artwork and stuff. Like, this really showed me that like working with textures and just leaving them looking more natural can work out really, really well. So maybe in the future with some of my artworks, if, you know, something like color-wise flows more natural, and I'm like not sure about it because it is not what I wanted, but like you know, I will just take a step back, look at it, and see if it actually looks good, even if it's not what I originally intended it to look to. And definitely has given me a bit more of this, like, you know, less critical about being perfect kind of thing, and I really liked that. I really enjoyed that. But again, let me know in the comments down below any tips and tricks you have for me, any experience with these kind of art styles and things. And of course, let me know, have you ever tried this art style, or is it something you're interested in? And I'm definitely going to read up a bit more on the history of that, because after trying this out, you know, it made me much more interested in the like culture behind this art style, because it seems to have a lot of important representation in Asian history. So, you know, made me really curious, since I also really like history in a general sense. And of course, as always, I hope you have a great day and a good new year. I hope that you got to celebrate the holidays in a nice and fun way and had a good time, hopefully off work, for all of you. And for those who did have to work, I hope you can, you know, take some time off after New Year's and just, you know, rest up and enjoy the days, the beginning of the new year. And hopefully this year, you know, you get to enjoy some maybe even new crafts that you want to experience, and a lot of fun crafting. And of course, you know, a good year in general. And I guess I'll see you all next time. Bye bye!